Get the mic on now, load.
Yeah, but it's super backlit.
Alright, as we're at Wilde Arrow, we're gonna do a few things today. We're gonna set up Brian's Satori. I forgot my stupid Satori, but we're gonna set that up and we're gonna shoot some different releases and see which ones Brian likes. My bow isn't put together yet. Hopefully by the 1st of April it'll be ready to go, but until then I'm gonna shoot Brian's bow, his Redworks. Okay, let's go. No, like right now, let's go. Come on, dude, let's go. Come on, let's go.
Shoots a straight arrow, which is. But
hey guys, what's up, fellas? How's it going?
What's up?
We got all of us, well, besides Eric.
Oh, really? Oh, well, he don't count.
I've got fairly
Small wrist. Yeah.
I'm small wrist.
Yeah, well, they look nice.
They're petite.
That's right. What you want to do is, like, when I pull this out and get a little bit of tension on there, what I'm looking at is the length of the release to your palm, and most shooters shoot way too long of a release aid. Okay?
Yeah, which creates that reach.
Yeah, it creates the reach. And what happens with that is, with release aids, when they're too long, not only does it affect your anchor point, but then you'll have to, like you said, you have to reach out for it. So what happens a lot of times, by the time I shorten this release aid down to where I want it to fit you, because I don't care about how this feels when you go to put it onto your string loop, I care about where you anchor at with it, right? It feels kind of awkward. You almost have to close the trigger with like your second and your third finger back. So at first you're like, oh man, this feels really weird, right? And so that's why I'm a big fan of an open hook style release aid. I don't have to close calipers on that string loop. It's the hook's open, it's set, so it's a really fast, quick hook onto the side, and then easier to wrap my fingers behind.
So basically, you're not a huge fan of that because of what you just described.
Once you get comfortable with putting that onto your string loop, yeah, you're fine with it. But, you know,
in the heat of the moment,
right, you're excited, you're trying to close it. Maybe your hands are cold, it's a colder morning. Gloves, when you start going to gloves, makes it that much harder. So that's why I'm a big fan of an open hook style release aid. They're just way fast, way easy.
Guys, we are back at Wilde Arrow Archery. If you followed our channel for a while, you've seen us here a ton setting up all of our bows. Jeremiah and his team are who we trust to get our bows completely tuned up, set up, dialed up. Because of some of the feedback we've had on recent videos, we're going to get a little more technical than we've probably ever gotten in the past. Today we're going to be talking about release aids. Different styles of release aids. Jeremiah's going to cover a bunch of topics that are common mistakes, common challenges, and just different things to think about while, whether you're a beginner archer or a little bit more intermediate. So that's going to be the topic of today's video. Future videos are going to include arrow setup, arrow tuning, arrow weight, amongst many, many other things. So if you have a specific topic you want to learn more about that's archery related, let us know in the comment section. Jeremiah, if you've watched any of these other videos, is a wealth of knowledge and great resource that we can help bring information to all of you.
We're going to do that at the last.
Look at that guy.
Commenting on YouTube.
Where's the peach colored hush shirt? When did we make that?
That was a complete sample shirt.
Oh yeah.
But one of the things that, again, depends on the length of the shooter's hand, is
that
sometimes
thing,
this gets too long. We can't actually shorten it down short enough a lot of times. And so kind of out of, you know, there's a lot of good ones, but one of my favorite we sell is actually the True Ball Beast.
Okay.
And for a couple reasons. One, it's a anytime you go to a hook series release like the True Fire, the True Ball, or this detonator, it's a metal on metal sear system. So I kind of compare it, like if you've ever shot like a high-end trigger on a rifle,
yeah,
you're going to get the same crisp feel. A lot of releases, like what's on your release now, this is a roller sear system.
Okay.
So you can't load up as much tension on the release aid because those rollers, excuse me, are designed to roll, and so you can't get a good, crisp, clean break. So out of all these releases here, you know, like the True Fire, but again, sometimes for certain shooters' hands, this still becomes too long. We can't shorten it down far enough. Like the Beast, and then the True Glow Detonator is a fantastic release. It uses the new BOA system as far as the wrist strap goes, and you have an option between the nylon connection or a solid post.
Okay.
That's more of a personal preference there.
So I'm more of a fan of the nylon myself. I like the flexibility to tuck it away if you need to, whatever, versus the big, you know, stiff metal post that a lot of these options have.
Right.
One point of clarification too, guys, we have no affiliation with any of these release companies, none whatsoever. So Jeremiah is just giving his honest opinion as a bow technician for many, many years and, you know, running and owning this shop. He gets to have a chance to play around with all of them, hear customer feedback from all of them. So just another nice resource to have. And I think I'm not totally sold on this. This is what I had kind of as my backup, but I'm really interested to try a few of these out and see which one's going to make the most sense for me.
So I'd say let's try this beast. And one of the main reasons is it actually comes with an extra spring. You see it in the back of the package here. That extra spring increases the tension. So a lot of customers I work with have a tendency to want to control or what you call, you know, slap that trigger. So I like to run a really heavy spring in all my release aids. And the reason I do that is when I hook my finger up over the trigger, I actually like to put a little bit of pressure on the trigger and then execute the rest of the release by actually pulling through. And my opinion on this, too light of a release aid actually causes target panic.
Well, so I was talking to Casey about this a minute ago.
Very light.
Super light, right?
Now, that's going to change a little bit at full
when you
draw.
Have a string.
Yeah, when you put tension from your string loop, that will stiffen up a little bit, right?
Man.
But that really light control, now I've had customers try my own personal release aid and they'll get back to full draw and they'll come around, they'll hit it. They're like, hey, your release is broke. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, it didn't fire. I say, oh no. You got to learn how to roll that finger over that trigger. We call it the hook pull method. So your finger needs to be like this. Get your anchor point. When you roll that finger over, as you start to apply a little bit of pressure against that trigger, you actually want to kind of pull through the rest of the shot. And if the shot surprises and breaks you, like when you shoot your rifle off of bench rest, your bow should feel the exact same way. If it doesn't break the same way, you didn't execute it correctly.
So Jeremiah made a mention of this earlier, but I think by far one of the biggest mistakes archers made, myself included, is, like he was saying, not having the proper setup on your release. The biggest thing that I see, and I know Jeremiah sees, is this component of the release is too long down your hand. And when you're at full draw, it's going to create where you have to reach with your finger. And then the common term that we hear a lot is slapping the trigger. You see guys reaching and then having to slap or punch the trigger. Versus what he's talking about is this hook release. You'll see a lot of more experienced archers that are using this style of release aid where their finger's literally at a 90. And then, like he mentioned, they're just pulling with their back muscles through the release. This part of their finger almost doesn't even work. It's just bent over and acting as that tension. So that's probably the biggest thing I've seen. And then when that happens, when you're stretching and slapping, punching the trigger, you're just going to mess up your accuracy, right?
You're not controlling, you know, you don't want to control that shot. You want that shot to surprise you. So, and that kind of goes back to aiming the bow, and we can kind of cover that because everything obviously with archery is tied together, right? If you're weak in one component, it's going to affect you somewhere else. So, but yeah, well, let's go try this and we'll
just one point of clarification, there's a ton of different style of release aids. We are going to focus on this particular style today.
So this would be an index release, right? Most guys feel comfortable with the wrist strap, and the reason being is good quality releases, and you're not having to pay a ton of money for them.
But there's a ton of different ones. Jeremiah has them here at Wilde Arrow. You'll see them at your local archery shop. They can be pretty basic, and then they can get up to really pretty expensive, pretty high end, right?
200. I mean, a good handheld, you know, something like this usually is $200, $250. Actually, this is the release that I shoot here, the True Ball thing, and the reason being is it's one of the better quality release aids that I've shot, especially for this price range. It comes with 2 extra springs to have 2 different tensions on there. I'm adamant, this is what I tell my customers, I always shoot a backup release. It's identical to my main one. And so all summer long, say if you get this, I'd recommend to buy 2. Set them the same length with the same spring tension.
Would you expect anything else from a guy that has an archery shop? Guys, whatever you do, buy 2 of everything.
It's backup.
But here is the reality. He told me this last time I was in setting up my new Hoyt Redworks. It makes a lot of sense. If you were to lose, break, damage your #1 release, and you're out on a hunt, whether you're out on a backpack hunt or just out, you know, 5 hours from the closest sportsman's warehouse or archery shop, that's going to really put a damper on your hunt. So having 2 of them and probably shooting with both of them, right?
Right, so I recommend that all summer long is to get two of the same release, and then what I used to do is alternate my releases. So every time I'd go out and shoot, I would take one, I'd go shoot it the next session, I would put that down and grab my other one. That way both release straps were broken in the same, and at the end of the summer, I could go out to 80 yards, I'd put my release on, I could draw back and shoot, I'd take it off, I'd grab my other release and put it on, same point of impact. So what happens, I see guys do this a lot, is they'll come in and buy a new release aid and go, oh, I love it, it's great. Well, you're out on a hunt and stuff happens, you know, guys take them off and leave them on the mountain or lose them, break them. Well, they go to the backup release, like maybe what you're wearing, right? Well, because you haven't practiced with that all summer, you're not going to make the same shot with that release aid.
So here's a prime example. This is my backup. It's not broken in at all. It's still got the initial folds from being in the packaging, and it feels a lot different on my wrist than my my release that I've been using for the last several years. So to Jeremiah's point, having that rotation to break them in equally, I think makes a ton of sense as well. Right. Basic things that I think we just forget about, either because we don't want to spend the extra money or we never really put a lot of thought into it, but they really make sense. And you're going to talk about, you know, spending another $85 to $200. However, would you pay that price when you're on your hunt and you need a second one? My guess is most guys would pay several $100s not to have to drive into town, or worse yet, pack out a backcountry hunt, then go into town.
I tell everybody, your backup release, if you ever have to use it, it feels like it's worth its weight in gold when it's on your wrist at that point.
Absolutely.
And the confidence of knowing, hey, I practiced with them in the summer, and you know, so I've had experiences like that where I was stalking a big buck one year, took my boots off, and I slipped on a rock and I had to put my hand down to catch myself, caught the trigger on a rock and it snapped it. I tell that story all the time because I had to hike off that mountain that day, and I learned the lesson the hard way, right?
The walk of shame that no archer wants to make.
Yes, and so ever since then, I was just adamant about a backup release, and like I said, they pay for themselves pretty quickly if you have to use them. So
sweet. Well, let's go try a few of these out then.
Yeah. So I'm going to have you try this True Ball Beast. It's that single hook design. It has a spring inside that resets the hook. So a lot of times when you shoot, you can see how the hook's not set there?
Yeah.
If you squeeze the trigger one time, see how it resets that hook perfectly? But it's a metal on metal sear system, so as you start to, when you get back, you get tension, you start to pull through, you're going to get a really crisp, clean break. So it comes in here with one spring, but it's kind of the lighter spring. And it ships in the package. This is taped to the back of the package. A lot of guys don't see it and actually throw this away. But it's a stiffer spring, and I'm a big firm believer of a little bit stiffer spring causes you to actually pull and execute through the shot better. So pretty simple to swap that out. Just going to back this set screw out, and you can see there's a spring inside. You're going to pop it out. You can see the difference in the thickness, right? This is a really, really thin spring, and this is going to be a lot thicker. So that's going to get a lot more tension and pressure. Just snug that down. So now, right now, you can. It's a little bit stiffer, but again, once you get back to full draw, and this is their swept trigger design. A little bit easier to get that finger wrapped behind there. So
compared to that other one I had, for sure.
Yeah,
that was very like perpendicular, I guess, to your
yeah, it come, you know, a lot of times they'll come straight out like that, which is fine, but then what happens, you got to reach, sometimes you got to reach almost a little too far, so that's why they like this swept trigger, so your finger doesn't have to come as far forward to get around there. And they have a good little mechanic's head. They have 2 screws on each side of these, and I tell guys, like, with those, just snug these up. You don't need to really go too tight on there. I see a lot of guys get these releases and just they'll tighten them down much. They actually blow the screws and the threads out of the release there. So. And you know, I'm kind of like you. Like, I like this release. The solid bar is not my personal preference. I usually like the nylon strap, but at least this head's a little bit more free floating. And see what it's designed to do is when you get back, if you move your wrist, see how the head's designed to pivot and spins here.
Ball on there.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, well, I'd be trying a couple shots out of this and see what you think, man.
That's going to take a little getting used to. So with this style, you're just basically
really fast on and off. So, and I've liked that because, you know, with those releases, there's times where, like, I've got an animal coming in, I've hooked that release on, but they're moving. Maybe I need to reach down and grab my bino again. It's so fast on and off that string loop. So if I need to unhook, grab my rangefinder, then hook back on, it's just really fast. And you know what's funny is every customer I recommend this for, the first question I say, well, is that going to come off my string loop? And I physically have tried to draw and turn my wrist far enough to get this to slip off, and You'd almost have to purposely try to do it to get that thing to come off.
I know, like with the other styles that I've shot, I've always been conscious of having my finger behind it.
100%, yeah.
Right.
I always recommend that.
No matter what.
No matter what, always draw with that finger behind. If you look in our demo range, we get arrows up in the ceiling and the wall from that. So
this one, to reset it, you just press down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so a lot of those hook style releases are either going to have a spring return, or some of the new ones actually use magnets to return that hook every time.
Really?
Yeah, but you can kind of feel how you got to pull through and get a little bit of, you got to get on, kind of put some pressure on that trigger to get it to break, and it's not as light. Remember your last one, you just barely tapping it once you release. So a lot of times, you know, when a customer comes in, they want to try something new, like a new release aid, or they're trying something on their bow. The first thing they do is run back to 20 yards and see how they group with it. Well, what happens is you got to kind of reprogram your brain of what you're doing with it, right? New release aid, you're going to maybe anchor a little bit different with that. So sometimes you got to double check peep height if you change your release aids, especially when you start changing that length that we talked about. That can have a big effect on your overall anchor point and then your peep sight. But the other thing too, and I tell guys, like, I blank bell a lot. I have a target set up in my basement at home.
So real quick, for those not familiar, what is blank bailing?
So blank bailing is basically standing point blank in front of a target, and I'm not worrying about aiming my bow. I'm working on the mechanics. So I work on, like, how do I stand with my feet, okay? How did I put my bow in my hand in my bow here with that grip pressure? And then when I drew back, how did I anchor? And then the last thing is, how did I execute with the release aid? You can perfect all of those literally shooting 5 feet away from a target, and you don't want to worry about aiming. So you'll see a lot of professional archers that still blank bail. You go to, like, the World Cup when they come here to, you know, Salt Lake, you'll see a lot of professional archers standing 5 feet away from a target and just shooting arrow after arrow after arrow. And what they're doing is they're working on the mechanics and their shot execution. Your mechanics and shot execution need to be so solid that you could do it, just, you feel like you do it in your sleep, right? Because the next step, that what you really want to work on, is aiming, of how well do you hold and aim that pin on the target. But until your shot execution is dialed in, don't incorporate aiming into it yet. So whenever I'm getting used to something new, point blank shooting is the way to go.
Another solid tip from Jeremiah. He's full of them. Yes, he's full of them.
That's kind of his speed with the green and pink, isn't it?
Right in my alley. It's the first time I ever shot the RX-1.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, taking a location.
It's the first time I ever shot one of these.
Yeah.
And then all those days you don't do
Roll that thing all the way over, almost to your second. Get a little bit deeper. Good. There you go. See how when you hook that in, it actually pulls your hand into your jawbone?
It does.
Now the only thing I want you to do is put some pressure, 80% of the pressure in your trigger and 20% of the pressure in your back elbows. Pull, pull, pull. Pull, pull, pull.
Yeah, no, I'm not in any hurry.
There you go. It's harder at first,
It's different,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's way different.
That's
And you felt like those muscles start to shake?
Yeah.
So those stabilizer muscles that are required to execute, you're developing those. So when you work on pulling, at first you're like, holy crap, this is hard. You have a lot of pin float movement, but once you build those shooting muscles up, your pin float will get smaller and steadier that way.
I think the interesting tip that you just suggested is really grabbing more in, which then, like you were saying, sucks it into your jawbone more, versus trying to just leave it and reach.
Yeah, I typically tell guys, in between, you know, your first and second knuckle, anywhere in this part of your pad here, wherever you kind of feel comfortable, but if your finger's out here like this, when you roll that in, you'll feel this hand pull forward, and this bone will kind of lock in behind your jawbone a little bit tighter, so you have a little bit more secure anchor point.
We can calibrate it on the same system, we have to calibrate it differently. So I gotta shoot it for different distances.
Roll that finger all the way over. Tip your nose up right on top. Don't worry about it, Pete.
Throw a factory set tape on, that'll give you a good reference.
Roll, and remember, 80% there, and then pull with that elbow. Good. I can tell you're executing the right way of your follow through, right?
Yeah.
So when guys are like, oh, I shoot back tension, they'll shoot and their hand comes here and stops. And I know they control the release because they anticipate it. When that release surprises and breaks, you feel this backhand, actually, you can't control it, it just comes all the way through the back. That can tell me that you're actually executing using tension and pressure. But it looks to me like we might need to move your peep up a little bit. Because we shorten this down, a lot of times this hand will come forward and in like this, which causes your nose, when you got your nose on there, that peep might need to move up just a little bit now, so you're not so far scrunched into it. Roll that finger all the way over. Good. Pressure. Good.
Definitely is a different feel than what I've been used to for the last probably 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But I can see how this would become very comfortable without a whole lot of time practicing, just like some repetition.
The biggest thing that you want to do is, when you're training yourself to do this, practice blank bell like this. I shoot my basement at this distance a lot, actually. I put a target down there and practice. And when you're trying to overcome that slapping that trigger, a lot of times you feel good here because you're focusing on one thing, right?
Yeah.
You're focusing on the release aid.
Like you said, you're just working on it. If you work on mechanics here at 2 yards, and then you can replicate that at 20 or 100, it's the same mechanical execution.
Yes.
And like Jeremiah's saying, if you were to just jump right out at 20 yards, you're going to spend a lot of time focusing on the aim point versus the mechanics, right?
Right. So here's what happens with shooting archery. The execution of your release actually needs to happen subconsciously. Okay. So when you get back and you're holding here, and right now you're thinking about it, you're like, okay, 80% here, 20% here, right? You get that release to break. Eventually, this needs to happen subconsciously. There's only one thing you should think about at full draw, and that is aiming. But until you get so comfortable with the execution, when you go back to the range, you feel what you're making the shot. You're like, oh man, that feels great. It's breaking. But what happens as soon as guys go back at 20 yards, they fall back into that old habit of timing and pulling that trigger again. So you got to discipline yourself mentally to go, okay, I'm not going to slap this trigger. And if you get back there and go, oh, I was going to slap it, put your finger behind, let down, and come back and blank bell again until this becomes so natural and comfortable for you. Pull. Good. Solid, man. Looks good.
Wanna try it, man? You should try it with this release.
Yeah. All right. I've been trying to listen to Jeremiah while he's been showing Brian, so we'll see how I do.
I say like your goat tough is really runny.
Look good.
Look good, actually.
Felt very different. I feel like I'm actually following through now.
Yeah,
something I've probably never done. It makes a lot of sense about practicing the techniques and the mechanics on a close target where that's all you're worried about is perfecting your mechanics, because you're not worried about sight, you're not worried about like your aiming. You're just working on that one mechanic, which is 80% with your finger, 20% with your elbow pulling back.
In your mind, you think when you're pulling back and like you set it and pull, it's going to shake off. But if you get it set just right and have the pressure on there already, when you pull back, it just goes off.
It's wild.
Brian's going to take his mechanic practice to the range.
We'll see how this goes. I'll try that one more time.
Are you concentrated on your release?
Yeah, trying to. Definitely different than what I've been used to.
Look good.
Gonna take some work to get comfortable, but I like the potential.
Oh, it's really good, man.
That felt
smooth.
Much better, but not bad. Not bad.
Shrinking those groups.
The one that's a little bit off, I have a feeling, is the one that I didn't feel great about. There's the first one.
Dang.
Which Jeremiah kindly pointed out. I completely hosed because I didn't follow through. But then the last two, where he was reminding me of my technique, obviously a lot better. But guys, it's just like anything you do. It takes a ton of practice. Jeremiah mentioned this earlier, but very few people go out and find an archery coach or somebody, a mentor, that can help them through the mechanics and become better. By no means do we think we're professionals at all. We are people that have done it for a long time, but probably never taken the time to get proper training or coaching. So the goal is to work with guys like Jeremiah. We have aspirations to go partner up with John Dudley and film some content. He's a great archery coach. And so we want to just continue to learn, get better at our craft, and hopefully that translates into more successful hunts. That's the goal.